I'm Mike.
I'm Sam. Let's get into it.
Tom Brady.
Welcome to episode 42 of the Mike and Sam Sports Show. Our first topic of the day is the Brooklyn Nets signing Steve Nash as their head coach. So what are your thoughts on Steve Nash becoming the head coach of the Brooklyn Nets? Someone who doesn't really have any head coaching or even assistant coaching background for that matter.
Yeah, that was kind of just such a thing out of left field. I think he was on nobody's radar in terms of coaching. Now, I know a couple stories about this. Is one that Dirk Nowitzki was kind of in the talks to be the assistant head coach, but he didn't want to get right back into full-time NBA schedule right away after retirement, which I completely respect, and I wouldn't want to either, to be completely honest with you. And two, that Greg Popovich was in the running. And to me, I do believe they shopped Greg Popovich. I believe that Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving have a large say in whatever goes on at this point in their kind of roster building and coaching building, which I don't think that's the smartest idea for the Nets to be doing, but I understand it's a players' league and you need to appease your players. But I do think they kind of struck out on Greg Popovich, and then they signed another Kevin Durant guy in Steve Nash, who obviously they have a big connection in Golden State. So maybe it wasn't the most surprising move. I certainly think that, or thought that, I should say, that the coach would be connected to Kyrie and or Kevin Durant somehow, and that's certainly what happened.
I'm just a little skeptical on this signing. I know they said it was a secret signing. They were in talks for a really long time, but just watching Steve Nash, he just doesn't. He seemed like a kind of a quiet assassin. It doesn't seem like a very vocal, like someone to yell at Kyrie or Katie when they're doing something. Like if you look at Cleveland Cavaliers when they had David Blatt, like LeBron walked all over David Blatt, and then they fired him. Tyronn Lue was kind of the same, but Tyronn Lue would yell at LeBron back. It was kind of what made him win that championship. But with Steve Nash, I don't know if that's going to happen. And I know Kyrie and KD are very outspoken players, so that might become some sort of an issue later on. I know that they are some of the most talented players in the league, so they are probably going to succeed regardless of the coaching. But I don't know if that's going to help them kind of win a championship, because when it comes down to it, if Steve Nash isn't able to do the right thing, are they going to be able to make a deep run in the playoffs?
I completely agree, and I think that is the main and number one thing to talk about this signing is just the dynamic between Steve Nash, who again is notorious for being kind of a silent assassin, and Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, guys who just absolutely hate taking criticism. I mean, Kevin Durant really never took any criticism from any of his coaches. Steve Kerr absolutely loved him. I mean, we saw that recent Steve Kerr quote about KD maybe being the best player kind of on the court he's ever seen, whatever that means from Steve Kerr. But I mean, just kind of going back to his playing days with maybe a Russell Westbrook who would maybe get on him somewhat, and then a guy like obviously Draymond Green. I mean, he just hates taking criticism, and then same could be said about Kyrie Irving. I think David Blatt would try to criticize not only Kyrie again, but LeBron as well, as you mentioned, and it really just never ended up working out. He just didn't have the respect of the guys. And then obviously Kyrie Irving, I mean, he took a 4 month hiatus, 3 month hiatus during, I think it was the 2017 playoffs, where he wouldn't even talk to his teammates. And I think he was really resentful of LeBron James for a long time for kind of giving him constructive criticism. So I think it's a really bad move for not only these guys to really have no leader on the Nets, which I think Kyrie and Kevin Durant both need in terms of kind of vocally, but again, they have a coach that, for lack of a better term, I do think they're going to be able to step over. And I mean, if their voices prevail, then that just might not be the greatest thing for their team.
Yeah, like obviously they're going to win games because they have a lot of talent on that team. I mean, they were in a playoff spot this year. I just don't understand why they really fired Kenny Atkinson. I mean, they were a good team without him last year with D'Angelo Russell. They somehow made the playoffs this year with I mean, they weren't as good, but they still made the playoffs with Kyrie injured, Kevin Durant injured. So I just don't know why they really fired him. I mean, obviously some teams they're successful. They just want to fire that head coach, kind of just put him over the top, which that could be the case in this situation. But I mean, it could be a downgrade, which is, I mean, we're gonna have to wait till game one of next year, but it could be a potential downgrade, which can hurt them in the long run.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's just a huge gamble. It's a weird situation where it's not like the Bucks signing Jason Kidd, where they have a young roster, they want to develop them. They have no max contract players. They weren't in a rush back then. It's really interesting because this is a win now roster. This is a win now team. This is you got to win the finals in the next 2 years if you're the Nets organization, you're their front office, making the move that they did, and certainly the pressure's on for them. And to sign a rookie head coach who hasn't even had experience in the assistant coaching world, I think it's just really weird how, again, they'll hire a rookie head coach to kind of coach this championship aspiration team.
Yeah, I mean, I see a lot of parallels with the Golden State Warriors with hiring Steve Kerr. Obviously, Steve Nash was a lot of a better player than Steve Kerr because Steve Nash,
Yeah.
two-time MVP. But like with the Golden State Warriors, Mark Jackson kind of set up that system, was the architect for their success later down the road. But with the Nets, like I don't know, with Steve Nash, are they just going to throw away their whole system and just their whole identity with Kenny Atkinson and just move into whatever Steve Nash wants to do? I just don't know if they're like if it's going to be a whole like regime change really, and it's gonna I don't know if it's going to stunt their growth.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. I mean, Atkinson, you brought up him. I expect him to be signed very soon. I think he's going to be a hot commodity. I would be interested to see him going to the New Orleans Pelicans. I think that's certainly something that's possible among a couple other teams that he can end up getting signed by. But again, I mean, it's just really peculiar. But I know we're kind of talking about the negatives here. Some of the positives, I mean, yeah, you mentioned it. Steve Nash is a two-time MVP. I mean, he's an absolutely great player, and he has shown some signs of kind of fighting back and kind of having his own voice. I remember very notoriously he would always argue and fight with Dwight Howard on the court when they were both on the Lakers. And I know that's viewed as a negative thing, but I guess that could be kind of a positive takeaway in a sense because he's willing to call out not only other big guys. Dwight Howard was coming right off of his Magic days where he was one of the best players in the NBA. So certainly Steve Nash kind of stepped up big in that way. But again, if he could bring something great to their schematics and not just have Kyrie and Kevin Durant kind of play one on one with and against each other, even in a sense, if it's kind of stunting their growth. So again, if he kind of draws up a great offense, I think this would be a really good signing for them.
I mean, yeah, I think that's just going to hurt the Nets. I think in the long run because obviously they're great players, but if they're just playing one-on-one hero ball, like Karis LeVert's not going to want to be there. Spencer Dinwiddie's not going to want to be there. Jared Allen, like those guys that are solid players and can do a lot of help to other kind of organizations that want to be taken over the top. I mean, if they're just sitting like just standing on the court while Kyrie's doing isolation ball, is that really like
Yeah.
how they're going to want to finish their career? So I don't know. They really Kyrie and Katie kind of have to open up their arms and let these other players kind of play with them to be successful. Because right now, do you think the Nets are the top team to beat in the East going in next year?
To be completely honest, I don't like the hype trains, but I think that's a great question. With the way the Bucks are playing right this second, with I think the Celtics roster, the Raptors roster, I legitimately believe they are the team to beat next year. I do.
Yeah, I do think that they also will be the team to beat because I mean Kevin Durant's a top 4 player, top 3 player. You can argue either way, but yeah, I mean, I just looking at the rosters, I don't think there's anyone that compares to the Nets at this moment with these two players on board. I mean, if the Celtics make a jump because they are playing very well as of lately, so if they are able to make a even bigger jump, kind of sign some better players, and they can possibly compete with the Nets at the top of the East.
I certainly agree, but I want to jump back to a point you made before you asked me that question. That was you're kind of alluding to Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant not really realizing that hero ball one on one, even though I'm really nervous about this kind of dynamic. And this is something that needs to be coached into them and instilled into them because sadly, even though they're veterans, I still don't think they understand this where you need to get your teammates involved. Like that's why LeBron James, for example, is so great because he knows that he can't score 50 points in a game and then with 3 minutes left to go, they're just double teaming him and double teaming his other superstar. And then he can't just pass out to the corner and expect the guy who's touched the ball a grand total of 3 times, has put up one shot to make a clutch three. That's why LeBron, very early on to the game, wants to get his role players very involved so they don't have a cold hand come clutch time when all the great players need their role players to step up. That's something that I don't think Giannis realizes, and I think that's affecting the Bucks right now. And that's something that Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, quite honestly, have never grasped. So if they can't get their teammates involved and they expect them to kind of hit these late game clutch shots, then I mean it's just not going to work out for this Nets team.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna have to wait and see. I mean, like I've said in this podcast already, obviously they're gonna win a lot of games based on talent purely, but I don't know
Yeah.
if like when it comes to the playoffs, Game 7 against the Celtics, and someone needs to make a shot to like, and KD's getting triple teamed. Is he gonna pass it away or is he gonna take the shot? You know.
Yeah, no, certainly.
But segueing into Giannis, talking about Giannis, the NBA playoffs. Obviously, yesterday they lost, going down 2 against the Miami Heat. And a very up in the air foul call at the end of the game to put Jimmy Butler on the line to win the game. What are your thoughts on that foul? Do you think it's a foul or not?
I mean, that was a complete makeup call. There's a situation where Chris Middleton had a three to tie the game, and I mean, it was kind of a ticky tack foul. I don't think it was a foul, but it wasn't egregious. It wasn't something where I was like, oh, that obviously wasn't a foul. I think it could have went either way, but again, I don't think it was a foul. So I think the refs kind of went back to the replay and saw that and were like, we got the call wrong. So no matter what happens, we're gonna kind of give Miami the win here. I think a little bit of that was in their head. And the Jimmy Butler, to answer your question, the Jimmy Butler jump shot was nowhere near a foul. Like it was just a great contest. It was 0% foul. And I think everybody, even Jimmy Butler, can acknowledge that. So it's certainly disappointing the game ended like that.
I'll disagree a little bit. I don't think it was an egregious foul, but I think that Giannis did kind of affect his landing position a little bit, and he did put his hand on his back, which kind of
Okay.
would affect a little bit of the shot. But I
Yeah.
don't think it was I don't think it was foul enough to call it to change the course of the game for the Heat to win. I don't think it was that big of a deal to call.
I respect that point, but I think something that is really getting overlooked that maybe could kind of be a sign for things to come in this series is that I don't think the Bucks are out of it because we saw a fourth quarter meltdown, basically a 2-minute meltdown by the Miami Heat. I mean, they're up by like what 6 or 8 points with I think like 30 seconds to go. And the fact that that even needed to happen, they even needed to win on kind of game sealing or game winning free throws. I mean, that's a little bit concerning. They definitely looked disoriented come kind of the final minute of the game. And the Bucks, not a good 2-minute team. I've talked about that many times, I think, in the podcast where I'm not confident in them in the last 2 minutes of a game. But still, I mean, Miami definitely looked vulnerable at the end of the day. And if they end up taking game three, I mean, it's certainly going to be a series.
I mean, yeah, I think the series is going to go 7 games. I think it's going to be a I think these teams match up very well against each other. Like I said, I think Bam Adebayo kind of complements his defense complements Giannis' offense, so they can cover one another. And Jimmy Butler is playing great, but also another point I want to bring up is Richard Jefferson tweeting that
Huh.
Giannis is Scottie Pippen, that he can't be the first guy. He needs to be a second fiddle for a team. And then Scottie Pippen clapping back and saying, "I never won 2 MVPs. I never won Defensive Player of the Year. I'm not like Giannis. What have you done in your career, Richard Jefferson?" So what are your thoughts? Do you think Giannis is that number one guy, or do you think he needs a second star?
First off, real quick before I answer that, I don't understand the last part. Like, why did Scottie Pippen get upset at that comment? He's literally comparing Giannis to himself. I feel like that's a
Yeah,
compliment. If anything, he was like that classic Michael Jordan, and I took it personally. Like,
yeah,
I don't
he
know
did.
why. It was just
He got a little too carried away.
he did. That was just unnecessary. And Richard Jefferson was a good player, but besides the point, I mean, he brings up really good points. I certainly think Giannis could be the best player on a championship team, but he's certainly right in the sense that you need another star surrounding Giannis to be able to hit that final shot. I think that's what he meant by that comment, and I certainly think that's true. I mean, Giannis hasn't proven to be that guy to hit the final shot in a game yet, even though I believe he has hit game winners before. But on a consistent basis, I certainly think he needs another guy, a guy like maybe Bradley Beal, who's really willing to take those final shots and kind of seal the game. I do think Giannis does need a guy like that.
Yeah, I think Giannis. I agree. I think he can be the number one guy in a championship. I just think the Bucks lack a lot of help for him. I mean, game one, Game one, Brooke Lopez had what 25, and that's so rare. That's not going to
Yeah.
happen every game. I mean, that's gonna how they're going to win games. But if they don't have it, they just have role players around Giannis. They're not going to win in the playoffs. Like Giannis will get you to the playoffs, but he's not going to he can't take you over the top alone. So I do think someone like Bradley Beal could be very helpful for that, helping the Bucks become a championship roster.
Certainly, and I mean, there's no shame in that whatsoever. I mean, you look back to 2016, LeBron James, a great clutch player, has proven to hit kind of, obviously, he has some hiccups, but mostly just take over the game in the fourth quarter and hit clutch shots. But even him, I mean, in 2016, Kyrie Irving averaged more shot attempts per game than LeBron James did. And he was taking a lot of the clutch shots at ends of games per LeBron's request. I mean, there's a very famous kind of audio clip of right when they get that timeout before that big Kyrie Irving three shot. He goes, draw up a play for Kyrie right now. I want Kyrie to get a one-on-one with Curry, and I want him to shoot the ball. And I mean, that's again what great leadership does. But again, that proves that there's no shame in not taking the last shot on a team. I mean, that's just playing smart basketball. So certainly, if Giannis could get another guy like that surrounding him, I mean, I do think the Bucks are finals bound.
Yeah, so I mean the Western Conference playoffs haven't second round hasn't started yet because those games just got set. But the other Eastern Conference series is the Raptors and Celtics. I mean, pair 3 minutes ago, OG and Anunoby just hit a game-winning shot to win the game, so it is 2-1. So sitting here right now, do you think the Raptors are able to carry this momentum into winning the series, or you think they're kind of this game's a little bit of a one-hit wonder? I think it might be a little bit of one-hit wonder. I think they can take one more against the Celtics, but I think the Celtics are going to end up winning in 6 games in this series.
I completely agree. I actually do think the Celtics are going to win in 6 games as well. Now, I do think that the Raptors can catch a little momentum from this game, but I think overwhelmingly that the Celtics just have better players top to bottom than the Raptors do. And that's really interesting because we think of the Toronto Raptors as this really depthful, just really good overall roster. And they have more, their ninth guy is better than the Celtics' ninth guy, but when you're looking at Fred VanVleet, who's really good, don't get me wrong, but he's taking a lot of shots. A guy like Kyle Lowry, who has proven time and time again he's not a good playoff player for the majority of his career. I know last year was an exception, but have him taking a lot of shots. For some reason, Pascal Siakam is posting up so much more than he did in the regular season, which really hasn't benefited them. So, I mean, overall, I just think the Celtics have better players offensively and just better scores. And sometimes that just gets you over the edge in the playoffs. And I think it will for the Celtics.
Yeah, I mean, I think Bleacher Report released a list that said the Celtics had what 4 top 50 players, so that's going to be
Yeah.
extremely helpful for you in the playoffs. Yeah, like you said, I just think the Raptors are loaded with a lot of role players, not a lot of stars. I think someone if Giannis was on the Raptors, I think they would be like very very good because they have the archetype for a
Yeah.
star player and then a great cast around him. Obviously, we saw that last year with Kawhi being the star player, and then they had a great cast around them. So, like, see if you have the star player that kind of excels Siakam a lot more to play well. I mean, I don't think he can't as of right now in his career. I don't think he can be that number one guy. I think he could be a number two guy for a championship team like we did see last year.
Yeah, and real quick, that point you made about Giannis, real quick to the Raptors. I know a lot of rumors have been kind of surrounding Giannis and where he's going to potentially go. And something I always look out for when with pending free agents is when they play in the playoffs, kind of how's their attitude against the other team. I know some very notorious playoff rounds where a player will go really hard against an opposing team and then they'll hit free agency. Like LeBron, I know I keep bringing up LeBron this episode. I'm sorry. He's just a good example for things. I remember LeBron in 2010 played so hard against the Celtics throughout his entire career. And I mean, he just kind of talked a lot of shit, and so did the Celtics with LeBron kind of back and forth. And they really played with anger and passion. And when the rumors kind of came out that, oh, he might sign with the Celtics, I said, no way, because it just doesn't seem like he would team up with those guys. He's not friends with those guys. But then you look at Kevin Durant, for example. I mean, he lost a series when he was 3 up to the Warriors, but it was always kind of like a friendly type of vibe between Kevin Durant and the Warriors, I thought. And when I'm watching this Heat series with Giannis, I get that same kind of friendly vibe for some reason. Just Giannis isn't going after these guys with anger. Like I've seen Giannis go after so many players with anger and that passion. So Giannis to the Heat, I've seen that kind of rumor circled around the NBA bubble, and I wouldn't be surprised if it happened.
Yeah, well, initially when they went down 2, I instantly saw notifications that, like, quote unquote, rumors are flying Giannis to the Heat or to the Raptors, and obviously reports of the Warriors have been going on for a couple months now. So, I mean, those are the 3 teams that I've heard that he would be moved to or signed to when he's a free agent. But I just think at this moment right now, looking at the Raptors, I mean the Bucks roster, I think he would move. But if the Bucks were to get another star, I think he would stay. I just think it depends on the management has to be very aggressive to keep Giannis to stay because I mean he's probably a top 3 player in the league, a top 4 player in the league. You don't want to lose him. That would just be very detrimental to your growth as a franchise.
Certainly, I mean, that would set them back for many years, in my opinion. They can't be naive. They can't think that keeping this really good roster, the number one team in the East for 2 straight years, mind you not, this roster, they can't be naive and think that they can just keep this squad and Giannis will come back because we were the 1 seed for 2 straight years. How can he not come back? But the reality is players want greater players to play with them. I mean, that's just a fact of the matter in the NBA. So they need to pull off a trade very immediately come this offseason, in my opinion, for a player better than Chris Middleton. They need a player better than Chris Middleton. Even if it means trading Chris Middleton, I think they should do it if they get a guaranteed better player. So, I mean, Giannis is definitely gone if that doesn't happen, in my opinion, and they lose in this round of the playoffs. But again, he's not even a free agent this summer. So I think it's kind of funny how we're kind of
Yeah,
talking about him so much and he's not even a free agent.
it is. It is. That's sports for you. But I think Chris Middleton's a very expendable piece. But one more game before we talk about the NFL. I want to talk about Game 7 of the. Was it Game 7 or Game 6? I might have been losing count, but the Rockets Thunder, where James
7.
Harden didn't really play great offensively, but I
Mm-hmm.
mean, came up with a huge clutch defensive play at the end of the game, which kind of that that shows how great of a player he is. I know he gets a lot of slack for being kind of lackadaisious on defense, but I think when the game's on the line, James Harden will step up and make defensive plays.
Certainly. I mean, he forever gained my respect on the defensive end when he guarded LeBron James in the 2012 finals. I know another LeBron reference, I'm sorry. But I mean, certainly, I think James Harden has been a lazy defender throughout his career, but certainly when he wants to turn it on, I think he's a really, really good defender, to be honest. And we definitely saw that on that last play. He kind of took advantage of a rather inexperienced basketball player in Lou Dort, an undrafted rookie, and really just made the best of that situation. But it was a little weird to see James Harden throughout the series, in my opinion, a little bit timid come kind of the 2 minute mark in the game and see Russell Westbrook really look like the initiator for their entire offense when, in my opinion, that's not the smart thing to do.
Yeah, I agree. Russell Westbrook throughout his career has always been a wild card, and just he is a great offensive talent at times, but it's just scary when he has the ball in his hands. You don't know if he's going to turn over the ball, which he did in Game 6, kind of to ice the game a little bit. But yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it was a fun series. Chris Paul obviously playing with a lot of pettiness and kind of rage in his heart because he did get dealt by the Rockets on kind of bad terms. But looking forward to the Rockets Lakers series. What do you think about that?
Yeah, real quick, going into the bubble, I really always knew that the Lakers and the Rockets would meet in the second round. I think the writing was on the wall. I don't mean to disrespect the Thunder or the Trailblazers in any way, but it was just kind of shaping out to be that. And I thought I was really nervous about the Lakers, but now, after watching kind of the first round, I'm much more confident about their prospects and just their ability to guard two really good perimeter threats and limit their threes. We saw James Harden and Russell Westbrook get a little bit limited in this series as well. So I think not only the Lakers' offensive firepower with LeBron James and Anthony Davis, but their really good defense more than anything else, I think is going to carry them to a series victory.
I think their defense is going to help them a lot, but I also think kind of just the pure length of the team. I mean, LeBron, Anthony Davis, obviously they're big players. JaVale McGee is very lengthy. Even Kuzma is very lengthy. And looking at the Rockets lineup. You obviously have PJ Tucker starting at the 5, so I think that's how they're gonna kind of dominate over this team by playing large ball and not small ball.
Certainly, I think that could be a case, but I think we can see another scenario where they're getting kind of toasted with that big lineup just because of the versatility that the Rockets have. And I do think Frank Vogel will panic a little bit and go small ball, which I don't know, again, if that would benefit them in the long run or not. But I mean, don't be surprised to see Anthony Davis playing a lot of 5 game 2 if they go down, or don't even be surprised if you see JaVale McGee getting 10 minutes a game in this series. I wouldn't be surprised.
I just think stooping down to the Rockets level, if you're going to play small ball, that's how you're going to lose the series. They're just going
Yep.
to, because obviously the Rockets are seasoned to play that way, that they've been built to play that way. They're going to beat you to play that way. So I think that would be the Lakers' downfall if that happens.
Absolutely. I'm a big you can't fight fire with fire type of guy in terms of NBA philosophy. I always hated those Rockets teams when they played the Warriors because they would try to outshoot the greatest shooting team of all time. That's just a stupid strategy. I know it almost worked, but if the Lakers again try to do the Rocket strategy, I don't think it's going to work.
Yep, we're excited to watch round 2 basketball. It's been great. Round 1 was great, so we're excited for more. But moving on to the NFL, we have some quarterback carousel going on. So some week 1 starters were named because the week 1 opening night is less than a week away, and then we have not James, Josh Rosen
Yeah.
putting on the trade market. So we'll dive into that first before we talk about the week 1 starters. So obviously they drafted Tua. They have Fitzpatrick kind of mentoring Tua. So I think the writing was on the wall for him to be traded soon. So as of right now, which team do you think would be the number 1 option to make some moves for Josh Rosen?
I really doubt any team makes a move for Josh Rosen, to be honest with you. And if they do, it's going to be a late round pick, in my opinion. Looking at the current climate of the NFL, maybe it does benefit him. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, with COVID wanting to have extra quarterbacks on the roster, but I mean, the only chance I see him getting is that if a team really looks at their starter and backup, and either one of them's hurt or one of them is just looking really shaky in practice, that's the only chance I see him getting signed to another team. But maybe a team like Jacksonville will sign him just as a flyer, as a backup to Gardner Minshew.
The team I thought about this a little bit. The team that kind of sticks out to me is the Pittsburgh Steelers because obviously
Yeah.
Big Ben is getting up there in age. They don't have really any depth behind at quarterback. I mean, they have Mason Rudolph and Duck, but you saw how that ended up last year. So I think kind of maybe, like you said, trading a 7th-round pick, 6th-round pick for Josh Rosen and have him sit behind Ben Roethlisberger and kind of mentor by Ben Roethlisberger, that can potentially be good, very good for his career because at Arizona and right now in Miami, he hasn't really had any veteran leadership at quarterback to kind of help him learn the NFL game, which kind of it hurt him right now. Obviously, he's the 3rd quarterback on that depth chart, so maybe the Steelers trade for him, and that can kind of help his career in the long run.
Yeah, no, I think it's really sad. I think the days of a team giving Josh Rosen a legitimate like shot at starting, I think those days are long gone, to be honest. And I know players are just on a really short leash and it's unfair today in the NFL, but that's just the way it is. I think the only way he even will carve out a starting NFL career, even a journeyman starting NFL career, such as Ryan Fitzpatrick, I think the only way of doing that is to kind of take a Tom Brady approach where play my ass off in practice and hope the starter gets injured. That's the only way I see Josh Rosen ever stepping onto the field as an actual named starter again, sadly.
Yeah, I like Josh Rosen a lot. It's sad to see.
Me too.
Moving on, we got our week 1 starters named for the New England Patriots and the Miami Dolphins. I'm not the Miami Dolphins. I'm sorry, the LA Chargers.
Yeah.
So LA Chargers named Tyrod Taylor or Tyrod Taylor as he likes to pronounce it over Justin Herbert, which I think is a smart move to do. I think Herbert's I think he's got a lot of NFL intangibles. He's very skilled, but I just don't think he's ready to start right away because he needs to learn a considerable amount.
Yeah, I mean, it's really smart by LA. You're not going to have the fans or maybe the no fans, either with COVID or not, considering they're the Chargers, kind of chanting for Justin Herbert to play after one Tyrod Taylor bad play. I think they could kind of cancel the noise with that out. in terms of, again, appealing the fan base with no fans in the stadiums. And then again, like you said, I think it's just smart for him to sit behind Tyrod and like Ryan Leaf, like a guy they drafted, what, 2 decades ago, played one great game, had his confidence shook in the second game, and it was all kind of downhill from there. Or I believe it was the third game he really got his confidence really struck. But I mean, again, with young quarterbacks, confidence is a huge thing, and one bad game could really spiral into a horrible career. So they're trying to prevent that, and they're definitely smart for that.
Yeah, I think Tyrod Taylor is probably, I wouldn't say one of the best backups, but I think he's one of the best mentors in the NFL.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at him in Cleveland. Obviously, Baker's last year he wasn't very good, but Baker's rookie year, he set the touchdown record for rookies in a single season.
Mhm.
And I think Tyrod Taylor had a very pivotal part in that process because Baker was able to learn behind him, ask questions and stuff like that. But I think the problem is I think Baker is a lot more kind of vocal player and he's not afraid to ask questions. I'm just scared I don't know if Justin Herbert's going to really ask many questions. He just seems like a very shy
Yeah.
and timid guy.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Hopefully, he learns a lot from Tyrod because though he's not a great quarterback, there's certainly a lot to learn from a veteran like him. But I certainly don't think, real quick, that the Chargers are a playoff team with Tyrod Taylor. People forget that Tyrod Taylor looked pretty awful for the Browns, to be completely honest. And Baker stepped in, and by comparison, I think his rookie season was a little overrated just because of how much better he looked in comparison to Tyrod Taylor, which is certainly a little bit concerning if you're kind of looking forward to the Chargers making the playoffs because again, I think in the current climate of not only their division but the AFC, I don't know if that's going to happen this season.
So do you think Justin Herbert's going to see the field at all this year, or is it going to be Tyrod through the whole year?
I do think so. I think either Tyrod's going to get hurt at some point or I legitimately think it's going to be week 16, week 17, they're out of the playoff picture.
Yeah.
I really do believe that and they're just going to kind of throw him in to see what he has.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the case. I think if they're out of the playoffs, week 16, week 17, he'll see some on the field action to just to get used to regular season defenses. But moving
Certainly.
on, oh, you want one more point you want to bring up?
Yeah, one more point, certainly, but I do think a major blow to them is Derwin James. I believe going
Yeah,
on IR and missing the whole season. Just wanted
yeah.
to kind of get that news in there.
Sad injury because he's one of the best defensive players in the league right now.
Yep.
But moving on to another quarterback carousel move, Cam Newton being named the Week 1 starter for the New England Patriots. I mean, Bill Belichick said it himself. He said he's one of the most talented players I've ever coached, which is very, very telling for one of the greatest coaches of all time. I mean, looking at film from Cam Newton seems he's having a great time. Obviously, Cam, just natural Cam, but he seems like he's being a great leader in New England, kind of high-fiving every wide receiver after every play, before every play. It seems like he's meshing very well with the Patriot way, if you will.
No, he really is. He's really impressed me, but I had really no doubt about that in terms of the cultural fit. I know a lot of people were trying to say, oh my God, he's such this outspoken guy. He's going to be like Michael Bennett, where he just didn't really mesh with the Patriot way, a guy like Antonio Brown. I really don't think that's the case with Cam Newton. I think he's a really outspoken guy, but at the same time, I think he's really mature and high character. I think there's been no evidence of him ever not taking football seriously. So, I mean, he's a guy, again, it's been talked about a lot. He's going to have a chip on his shoulder, and I do anticipate him having a pretty good season.
Yeah, I think he could be in the argument for comeback player of the year at the end of the year. Yeah, I mean, it's Cam Newton. He won an MVP. He won a
Yeah.
Heisman Trophy. He's a good football player, so it's not really shocking at this point that he won the starting job. I just think, yeah, he's a big chip on his shoulder, big kind of motivational guy. So I think this is gonna help him a lot in the long run. And New England, although they did lose a lot of players with players opting out, and obviously Tom Brady left. But I do think they're going to make a run at this division title. I don't think they're necessarily going to win because the Bills do have a great roster, but they could be in contention for the wild card at the end of the year.
I agree. And for some reason, I have this odd feeling that Cam Newton's going to have a good year with the Patriots and they're going to be playoff contenders, if not in the playoffs. And for whatever reason, Cam Newton's just not going to get another long-term contract in the NFL again, just because of the current climate of really good quarterbacks in the NFL right now and kind of young guys stepping into the league. Again, I just have a feeling that no matter how good he plays with the Patriots, he's going to get signed by other teams and even possibly by the Patriots, but I think his days of getting a 4 or 5 year contract are over.
Yeah, it's just with his play style, it's just very scary, and his injury history, it's scary to sign him to a long year contract. Um, Looking at other quarterback competitions, I mean, the Bears haven't named a quarterback yet. They said they're going to do one next week, which is kind of scary because it's week 1 on Sunday. So as I mean, I haven't really heard any news, but as of right now, who do you think is the quarterback, Nick Foles or Mitchell Trubisky?
I'm sorry, I don't care how good Mitch is doing in training camp. I don't care if he's flat out beating Nick Foles. I think you have to start Nick Foles just because you start in the confidence with his teammates, I think, are already knocked with him. And he's a situation where he plays again and he's just going to be his first bad play. They're going to want him out of there. And when it comes to Nick Foles, I mean, if Nick Foles does good, that's great. But even if he kind of does bad and they do get Mitch in there and he does look better than Nick Foles, I think by comparison, it'll just kind of rejuvenize the Bears fans' faith in Mitch.
Yeah, I think as of right now, just looking at Mitch's past history, I think Nick Foles can potentially make you a different team because he has a strong arm. He could make some of those throws that Mitch can't. But yeah, like you
Yeah.
said, if they decide to start Nick Foles week 1 and they're not playing well, and then they do put Mitch in and they start playing well, that can kind of salvage his career and his confidence with the when he's playing in Chicago. Because I mean, obviously, there's probably not going to be fans this year, but when your hometown fans start booing you, that's going to really hurt your growth.
Yeah, certainly. And that's already happened to him. And just one other point, I mean, you brought up the point of Nick Foles' is kind of deep ball, and I think that's certainly an element of their offense they've been missing the past couple of years. And I do think Matt Nagy is going to end up capitalizing on that. And I do think Nick Foles, if given a couple weeks to start and feel it out, will have a couple really good highlight plays.
One more quarterback carousel I want to bring up. This isn't the NFL; it just popped in my mind, but college football.
Hmm.
Jamie Newman, who transferred to Georgia to play at Georgia, and he was granted immediate eligibility, just opted out. Which
Yeah,
luckily Georgia got JT Daniels, who's a 5-star from USC, to transfer there. So just a little confusing because he knew he had the starting job at Georgia. He knew he was going to play. I think it's a very dumb decision of him because I think without this season, he's going to fall a considerable amount in the draft. But if he were to play at Georgia this year, he could have. I don't think he's a round 1 quarterback or round 2, but he could have kind of jumped up to a 3rd or 4th round pick if he played well this year with Georgia.
certainly. And correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't he kind of forgoing the season to prepare for the NFL draft?
Yeah, he is.
I mean, I don't get the logic in that. That just makes no sense whatsoever. That's like Joe Burrow in 2018 or in 2019 if COVID happened, being like, "Oh yeah, kind of showed some flashes. I have a really good team ahead of me and have a good opportunity, but I haven't really proven anything. I'm just gonna go declare for the NFL draft right now." I just obviously COVID and non-COVID is a completely different situation, but I certainly think that's a dumb move. Maybe he's playing the long game. Maybe he's playing chess and he doesn't want to get drafted by a bad team. But at the end of the day, I think most guys just want to get picked high in the draft and get a lot of money when they get picked.
Yeah, I think it was a very dumb move by him. I think playing this season would help him a lot. And like the Joe Burrow point was a great point that you brought up because if Joe Burrow was decent the year before, but if he never played this year, he would have been a late round pick, maybe even undrafted. But yeah, I
Yeah.
think this is going to hurt Jamie Newman a lot because the whole reason, I mean, he wasn't breaking records at Wake Forest. I mean, I'm not really watching Wake Forest football to be honest with you, but being at the national spotlight at Georgia, making a national championship run, that could have kind of catapult his name into stardom.
Yeah, and I do think he really needed to prove himself this season in college football because I think an element of the draft that is a little bit understated is I do think the program of which guys graduate from does have a little bit of a stigma going into the NFL, especially for quarterbacks, because a lot of college football offenses aren't kind of pro style offenses. And it's really important to prove that you could play in a pro style offense. And I know Georgia had more of a pro style offense, I believe, than Wake Forest. But even then, Georgia is really not known for producing good quarterback talent. So, again, I think it was just really important for Jamie Newman to go out there and prove himself.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Matthew Stafford went to Georgia. I think he can be a
Yeah.
kind of a lone case, but if you
Mhm.
talk about Jake Fromm, he's not the most talented quarterback, but I think just having the training camp and having the coaches at Georgia, that kind of helped him propel himself to become a what was he, a fourth round draft pick?
Yeah, I think he was third or fourth, but yeah, certainly.
And I think Jamie Newman's a lot more athletic than Jake Fromm is, and that he could have, if he played this year, but he's not, he could have been a higher even maybe third, fourth around there, like Jake Fromm.
Yeah, I mean, this year is just going to be a really, really interesting year. I wouldn't be surprised if a Kirk Cousins situation happened this year with Jamie Newman, where a team picks a quarterback really high, then they pick Jamie Newman in the fourth round because he just falls there just to kind of have that security blanket. Because I do think he has high upside, but again, he's unproven.
Yeah, and then last point, just Georgia lucking out having JT Daniels, who was a former five-star recruit, transferring him there. What I think 2 months ago, maybe a month ago. So luckily they have a stud at quarterback already.
Yeah, maybe this could be his chance to prove that he's a future NFL quarterback. Is he NFL eligible after the 2021 season?
No, he was a freshman last year. He got ran out of town by a backup quarterback, Caden Slovis, who is a very good
Okay.
quarterback right now. So, yeah, this kind of a redemption year for him because he did get hurt, but he lost the starting job after he got hurt.
Interesting. Yeah, maybe he can propel this into a starting gig with Georgia for multiple years.
We're excited to see college football. There's some games on right now, and the Power Fives games minus the
Mhm.
Big Ten are coming very close. So we're excited for that. But thank everybody for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.